was the GOP plan all along to, quote, break America to make room for an authoritarian strongman? And, you know, it's pretty straightforward stuff. I actually start out with the story of when I was 22 years old, I took the Dale Carnegie course, and which changed my life. I mean, it gave me a set of tools that I've used throughout, you know, in running businesses and in being in the media and all. It was just a wonderful thing. I strongly recommend it to anybody, you know, who is looking for a good jolt. But anyhow, in the 5th or 6th week of the course, we had to do this thing where you get up in front of the whole group. You know, it's a public speaking course. You get up in front of the group and you say, I know people in the ranks who will stay in the ranks. Why? I'll tell you why. Simply because they haven't the ability to get things done. And you would have to, you know, perform this, act it out, right? Well, the ability to get things done is a high value for business, but it's also a high value in politics. And that's where authoritarian strongmen come in, because the single most appealing thing about an authoritarian strongman, about a dictator, is that he can get things done. You know, dictators don't have to worry about bureaucracies hindering them or pesky laws and regulations. They don't have to care about local opposition to their projects or their impact on the environment. You know, from making the trains run on time to building the Autobahn and Volkswagen, dictators famously get things done, right? And the corollary to that old nostrum is that when things are going well, when things are working smoothly, when the people are getting what they want from their government, there's little interest in putting a dictator into office. You have to break government really badly to make the people willing to say, yes, we'll take a dictator. Anything is better than this chaos. Germany, you know, and we've seen this, by the way, throughout history. Germany would not have embraced Hitler if it wasn't for the depression that followed the Treaty of Versailles and losing World War I. Mussolini stepped in to take over Italy during a time of multiple crises, the echo of the pandemic, the flu pandemic, World War I, the economic crash. The government in Italy was so weak that when Mussolini showed up with his 20,000 black shirts, you know, his volunteer militia, the king just said, okay, here's the keys. You're in charge now. Pinochet was able to hold Chile in part because Nixon's sanctions had so badly bruised the Chilean economy. So this is, you know, if you want a strongman, if you want to install a strongman, as we see with, for example, the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, it's all about turning the presidency into a strongman dictator. Or I shouldn't say it's all about, but, you know, in concentrating power in the White House, they're rather upfront about this. So the bottom line is that, you know, I think that these people, the Republicans, have been intentionally breaking our government for the better part of 40 years. I realize this sounds like a conspiracy theory, but let me lay this out. Intentionally breaking our government with the idea that if things get bad enough, we will all say, okay, just give us a dictator. Somebody come in and fix things, please. I mean, consider what they have done over the last 40 years in their project. They broke our schools and our students, right? Reagan cut federal aid to education by 1/5. He ended free college education in California. He gutted civics education in the United States. He put us on the path to $2 trillion in student debt, which is, you know, kneecapping several generations now of young Americans. And now we have right-wing haters who are roiling school boards and threatening teachers to further break schools. Breaking our workers. Reagan also shattered the compact between workers and employers that had created and guaranteed a strong and stable middle class when he busted up Patco and then, you know, put an anti-Ray Donovan, an anti-labor lawyer in charge of the Labor Department. And then, you know, Trump followed in his footsteps. He put Anthony Scalia's son in charge of the Labor Department, a right-wing anti-labor union-busting lawyer. Breaking our manufacturing base. George H.W. Bush broke our nation's job market by executing the Trade Act that went into effect in '89 and amplified the GATT powers, the free trade powers of GATT. And he negotiated NAFTA, which Bill Clinton signed, which began the steady migration of good American jobs to Mexico and China, causing over 15,000 factories to close, over 20 million good jobs to vanish from America. They're breaking our wallets. Pharmaceutical and insurance companies scored major victories with George W. Bush the Medicare Advantage scam, and he put in that same piece of legislation, they wrote into that law that it is a crime now, it's illegal for the federal government to negotiate with drug companies for pharmaceutical prices. They just have to pay whatever the company says. And as a result of that, Americans now pay as much as 10 times more for drugs than any other country in the world. Breaking our environment. Republicans and the fossil fuel billionaires who own them have known since the 70s that their products were going to destroy our environment. And Jimmy Carter tried to do something about this back in the 70s with his solar bank program to have 20% of America's electricity produced by solar power by the year 2000. But, of course, Reagan came into office in 1981 with big bucks from the fossil fuel industry and took Carter's solar panels off the White House and ended his solar bank program. Breaking our society. Republicans once talked about freedom and individual responsibility, although, really these were buzzwords for let the billionaires do what they want, ignore the needs of the poor. Now they delight in pitting Americans against each other and demonizing minority groups, whether they're racial, religious, or gender, while promoting hateful racist tropes like the so-called Great Replacement theory. They're breaking our institutions of democracy. Republicans spent 3 years promoting the lie that Trump beat Biden in 2020. This is on top of 30 years of promoting the idea that there's massive voter fraud in America and using that as an excuse to make it harder for people to vote when there is no fraud crisis in this country. Never has been, at least not in the modern era. Breaking our stature in the world. There was a time when Republicans openly and strongly stood against dictators. No longer. Now, just last week, Donald Trump in one of his rallies openly praised Putin, Orban, and Xi while trashing NATO and the EU. Breaking our public health system. According to the British journal Lancet, 500,000 Americans died unnecessarily during the Trump presidency from COVID because he lied about masks and ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and all this other kind of stuff. Breaking women and girls. After a 50-year campaign against Roe v. Wade, Trump finally packed the Supreme Court with radical Catholics and, quoting a 17th century witch-burning English judge, now states can prosecute women for getting abortions and doctors. Breaking our children. For the past 40 years, the GOP has led the charge to get more guns in our schools. They've been so effective at this that bullets are now the leading cause of death of American children, something that has literally never, ever happened anywhere else in the world before. Breaking entrepreneurs. There was a time where the way to fully embrace the American dream was to start a small business in your community. The local dry cleaner, the local bank, the local furniture store or electronics store, the local pharmacy, if I didn't say that, the restaurant, the hotel, the travel agency, et cetera. But then in '83, Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act and other antitrust legislation, and now, if you try to start a small business, you get squashed like a bug by these giant corporations. They have destroyed or badly damaged our social contract. And now, as a result of the Republicans' 40-year campaign to break America, we have finally Americans are reaching the breaking point. Our kids are carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars in student debt. 41% of American families have more medical debt than they can handle. Republican governors are rolling out voucher programs that are destroying public school systems all across the country. Fox so-called news and other hate-driven media have convinced the Trump humpers that the U.S. is being invaded by brown-skinned people. They're in a constant state of hysteria. Oh, my God, CRT. Oh, my God, DEI. Oh, my God, BLM. Oh, my God, Antifa. Oh, my God, drag queens. Oh, my God, Taylor Swift. Pick the boogeyman, right? They're in a constant state of hysteria. And this is what the Republicans want. They want this crisis. They want this state of crisis because when people are in a state of crisis, they will go with the dictator. And you think the Republicans are not in favor of a dictator? Look at, as I said earlier, Project 2025. Let's concentrate as much power as possible in the White House. It's the essence of this plan. And then, of course, who's their leading candidate? Donald Trump, who literally says he wants to be a dictator from day one or on day one. 10 months from now, the choice is going to be ours. We got to get ready for this. I'll be back with more of the news of the day in your calls in just a moment. It's 15 minutes past the hour.